Her phone vibrated on the dining table. The sound was short, discreet, but at that moment it seemed to echo throughout the room. My eyes, which had previously been fixed on the plate in front of me, strayed to the device as if pulled by an invisible force. It was an instinct, a nagging feeling that had been bouncing around in the back of my mind for weeks, but that I tried to ignore. A message. The screen lit up, revealing the contact's name, "Dear Lover." My heart stopped. I felt a cold run down my spine, a wave of nausea rose to my throat. My hands were shaking when I picked up the phone. I opened the conversation. Words that shouldn't be there, that could never have been written by someone who claimed to love me. "I'm counting the seconds until I see you again, love. Last night was incredible, I still taste it." The blood rushed to my head so quickly that I almost lost my balance. I looked across the table, where she was fiddling with her fork absently, not knowing that, at that moment, everything was falling apart. I threw the phone on the table hard. The screen flickered, messages open for all to see. My voice was sharp, explosive, filled with a fury that I didn't even know I could feel. "What does this mean?" The silence was instantaneous. She looked up, confused, and then she saw them. Her eyes, those eyes that I had always loved, now stared at me wide, unresponsive, as if the world had stopped spinning. I felt a kind of bitter pleasure in watching her panic grow, her hands shaking as she took the phone back, as if she could erase everything and pretend it didn't happen. This is not what it seems," she murmured, but her voice cracked. My laugh was short, mocking, full of disdain. "Isn't that what it looks like?" I threw the napkin on the table and got up. "I want a divorce. Right now." The air became heavy. A second of silence felt like an eternity. She gaped, unable to say anything, as I walked away, my every step echoing across the floor like a hammer in her sentence. My heart was beating fast, but not with love. It was anger. A hatred that burned in his chest, a bitter taste of betrayal in his mouth. Everything we built, everything I lived alongside her, reduced to a cell phone screen in sordid words. There was no excuse. There was no justification. Just the stark reality that the woman I loved was sharing her body and soul with another man. My hands were clenched into fists when I entered the room. The suitcase thrown in a corner, still open since the last trip. It was ironic. I spent days away, working to give us a better life, while she found time to sleep with someone else. I opened the closet, pulled out drawers, grabbed the first clothes I found. Each piece that fell into the bag was like a piece of my story being torn up, thrown away. Behind me, her hurried footsteps. "Please wait," she asked, her voice breaking. "It was a mistake. I can explain." "There is nothing to explain," I replied, without even looking back. She tried to grab my arm, but I jerked away. Her touch now disgusted me. "It was just once," she started, but I turned so quickly that she backed away. "Once," I laughed bitterly. "So this here," I grabbed her phone and swiped up, revealing weeks of messages. "Was this all a mistake? Was it just once?" His mouth opened, but no words came out. She knew she was trapped. That there were no more excuses. "I got tired of being made a fool of," I continued, my chest rising and falling with heavy breathing. "I'm tired of trusting someone who doesn't deserve it." Her phone fell to the floor. She was helpless, her eyes shining with tears, but I felt nothing but contempt. "I loved you. I would give my life for you." My voice cracked at the end, because as furious as I was, it hurt. It hurt to know that I was the only one who took our marriage seriously. It hurt to know that while I saw her as my partner, she saw me as a nuisance, an obligation, a blank check to fund her double life. She tried to cry, tried to throw herself into my arms, but I backed away. "Don't touch me." My tone was so firm that she stopped instantly. "You made your choice. Now you'll have to live with it." I grabbed my bag and headed for the door. The sound of my own footsteps seemed to echo inside my chest, a drum beating non-stop. Before leaving, I looked back one last time. I saw the woman who was once the love of my life shrunken, destroyed, lost in her own lie. But it wasn't enough. The betrayal she inflicted on me could not be erased with tears. The price she would pay for this was yet to come. Fate has an ironic way of settling scores. I didn't know it at the time, but as I walked out that door, I was still about to see her undoing happen in ways that even I couldn't have predicted. And when it happened, it was so much worse than any revenge I could have imagined. Welcome to the channel. Here, we never support any type of betrayal. The stories you will hear are fictional, but they carry an immutable truth. Betrayal destroys homes, lives and trusts that can never be restored. Each narrative is a reminder of how devastating a mistake can be and the consequences it brings. Now, get ready. What you are about to hear is shocking, intense and unforgettable. The truth always comes out, and when it does, the price is high. Let's get to the story. Lucas has always been a practical man, someone who believed that effort and dedication were the pillars of any solid relationship. From a young age, I knew I wanted to build something stable, something that would last, and I found in Amanda the perfect partner for this dream. They met at college. He was studying business, she was studying interior design. It was a passion that started slowly, growing into long conversations until the early hours, in looks exchanged between classes, in discreet touches that became part of their daily lives. Time passed and what was once just a college romance turned into a solid marriage, one that everyone around admired. Lucas made a career in a large company, achieving financial stability, while Amanda followed her passion, becoming a renowned professional in the decoration sector. The couple seemed perfect, each with their own space, respecting each other's ambitions, and at the same time building a home that was a reflection of them both. The house where they lived was a reflection of this balance. Spacious, well-decorated, full of small details that showed Amanda's presence. Her touch was everywhere, in the carefully chosen furniture, in the colors of the walls that conveyed a feeling of coziness, in the strategically positioned paintings that brought a sophisticated air to the room. Lucas, on the other hand, filled that space with his firm presence, his organized and predictable posture, his way of keeping everything under control. They had a well-established routine, almost like a perfect clock. In the morning, they would have coffee together, talk about the day to come, make plans for the future. Lucas always left for work first, leaving Amanda to finish her cup of coffee alone before heading to the design office where he spent most of his time. On the weekends, they liked to go out to dinner, meet friends or simply stay at home and watch a movie on the couch. There was affection, there was laughter, there was intimacy. To any outside observer, they were an enviable couple, one that seemed made for each other. But the truth is that, over time, something subtle began to change. Small details that, for many, would go unnoticed, began to become uncomfortable for Lucas. Amanda's gaze seemed more distant at times, her laugh was no longer as spontaneous, her presence next to him seemed less intense. It wasn't something blatant, it wasn't something that could be easily explained, but it was a persistent feeling that he couldn't ignore. When she tried to talk about it, Amanda always minimized it, saying it was just tiredness, that the work was demanding a lot of her, that there was nothing wrong. And Lucas, wanting to believe this, ended up accepting his words and leaving his concern aside. He forced himself to think that maybe he was exaggerating, that it was just the weight of routine, something normal in any long-term marriage. However, something inside him couldn't completely calm down. There were times when he caught Amanda looking at her phone with a different smile, times when she seemed too distracted to pay attention to him. But Lucas was always a rational man, someone who didn't like to act on impulse, so he decided to ignore these concerns, convincing himself that everything was fine. He continued to dedicate himself to work, to his marriage, doing what he always did, ensuring that Amanda had everything she needed, that the house was in order, that the bills were paid, that the relationship continued to work. He prided himself on being a good husband, on being a trustworthy man, someone who would never leave his wife destitute. However, the more he tried to ignore that strange feeling, the more it grew inside him. It was like a shadow that accompanied him, a persistent discomfort that, no matter how much he tried to push away, never completely disappeared. Then he began to observe more closely. Small delays, messages answered quickly and with a discreet smile, calls that ended as soon as he entered the room. Amanda seemed more and more absent, and it made him wonder if everything was really okay or if something bigger was happening without him knowing. But he didn't want to jump to conclusions. After all, they were happy, weren't they? They had a stable marriage, a comfortable life, and Amanda always told him she loved him. So why did he feel like something was slipping through his fingers? He tried to push these thoughts away, focusing on other things. Work was going well, the company's projects were growing, and he knew that this would guarantee an even more solid future for both of them. When Amanda seemed more distant, he made an effort to rekindle the spark in their relationship, organizing surprises, proposing trips, trying to get things back to the way they were before. And sometimes it worked. Amanda smiled, thanked him, said he was the best husband in the world. And for a few days, everything seemed to go back to normal. But it was as if something was beyond Lucas' reach, something he couldn't touch, something that remained hidden in the corners of the house, in the silences between conversations, in Amanda's fleeting glances. Something that, sooner or later, he would have to face. And then, that night came. The night that everything would change. It was supposed to be just another ordinary night, dinner at home after a long day. Lucas arrived home from work early, feeling exhausted but excited to spend time with Amanda. The smell of the food she prepared filled the room, bringing a feeling of familiar comfort. He sat down at the table, helped himself and started to talk, but soon realized that Amanda was scattered. Her phone vibrated in the middle of dinner, and it was there, in that seemingly banal moment, that everything began to fall apart. His gaze fell on the illuminated screen of his cell phone, and then, for the first time, he saw the name that would change his life forever. Dear lover. His body froze. Time seemed to slow down. The air around him became heavy, as if there was suddenly no longer enough oxygen to breathe. My heart was beating fast, my thoughts were racing, trying to find an explanation that made sense. But there wasn't. Just that screen, that name, that silent confirmation that the restlessness he'd felt for months wasn't a figment of his imagination. It was real. And in that instant, he knew that nothing would be the same again. Lucas felt his heart beating in his ears, a muffled, distant sound, as if he were immersed in a deep, airless ocean. The image of the phone still burned in his mind. Dear lover. 2 words. 2 words that ripped away from him everything he believed to be real. Sitting at the table, watching Amanda a few meters away, he wondered how it was possible that she was there, in front of him, so calm, so oblivious to what he had just discovered. How could she smile, breathe, exist, while he felt his world falling apart? He forced a drink of water, but his throat felt closed. The dinner in front of him no longer had any flavor, the environment that was once their refuge now seemed cramped, suffocating. Amanda spoke, but her words became an indistinct hum. He needed to process. I needed to understand. The mind refused to accept what the eyes had seen. For a moment he wished it was all a misunderstanding, an absurd coincidence. But he knew it wasn't. Over the weeks, he began to observe Amanda more closely, every previously ignored detail now taking on new meaning. The messages she typed too quickly and then deleted, the discreet smiles at her cell phone screen, the moments of distraction when she seemed to be somewhere else, with someone else. Lucas felt like an idiot for having ignored all of that before, for having trusted blindly, for having believed that the love between them was unbreakable. But love was not a shield against betrayal. The following days were torment. He tried to act normal, to pretend nothing had changed, but the simple act of breathing around her took monumental effort. At night, lying next to her in bed, he felt the distance between them growing like an abyss. Amanda rolled onto her side and slept peacefully, while he stared at the ceiling, his chest burning with questions that had no answers. Who was he? Since when? Where? How many times? Each of these questions hammered in his mind, robbing him of sleep, eroding what little sanity he still had left. Lucas knew he needed proof. A name on a screen was not enough. He needed to see, he needed to hear, he needed to be sure. So, he started paying attention to Amanda's schedule. On the day she said she needed to work late, he drove to her office and waited. But she was never there. When he said he was going to meet a friend, he checked social media, hoping for some clue, but no photos, no mentions, nothing to confirm that she was where she said she was. Restlessness became obsession. He needed to find out, needed to know. And then one night she came out saying she had a last-minute meeting with an important client. But something in the way she avoided his gaze, in the rehearsed tone of voice, made Lucas make a decision. He would wait. I would count the minutes. If she didn't come back at her usual time, she would follow her instincts. The clock struck midnight and she still hadn't returned. Lucas took the car keys and drove without a specific destination, without a defined plan, just following a suffocating intuition. And then, at the intersection near the center, he saw her. Her car was parked in front of an inconspicuous building, with no signs or signs. The lights in the third-floor apartment were on, the curtains were barely closed. Lucas stopped across the street, his stomach twisting as he saw Amanda's silhouette inside, moving through the living room. And then, another shadow appeared beside her. His heart stopped. He watched as the man approached her, as she tilted her head toward him, as he held her waist with familiarity. Lucas closed his eyes, wishing, begging that this was a nightmare. But when he looked again, there was no doubt. Amanda wasn't in a meeting. She was in another man's arms. A wave of nausea rose in his throat. His entire body tensed, anger exploding inside him like an uncontrollable fire. He could feel the cold sweat on his palms, his fingers gripping the steering wheel tightly. He wanted to get out of the car, go up the stairs, break down the door, confront her there, in front of that man. But he held back. Not at that moment. Not like that. He would need more. She would need definitive proof, something that would guarantee that Amanda had no way to defend herself, no way to lie, no way to get away with it. Then he waited. And waited. Time passed slowly, each minute weighing like a stone on him. When the apartment door finally opened, Amanda came out first. His hair was slightly messy, his clothes were disheveled. The man appeared right behind, touching her back intimately. Lucas gripped the steering wheel tighter, feeling his eyes burn. It was real. It was happening in front of him. The woman he loved, who he trusted, was there, laughing at someone else, letting herself be touched, hugged, kissed. The pain of betrayal went through him like a sharp blade. He waited for Amanda to get into the car and drive away before starting the engine and following her, his mind racing with dark thoughts. When he got home, he stopped in the garage, breathing deeply, trying to control the turmoil inside him. When he entered, Amanda was already in the bathroom, probably getting ready to lie down next to him as if nothing had happened. As if she hadn't been in another man's arms just minutes before. Lucas stood in the middle of the room, his chest rising and falling in an irregular rhythm. Every detail of that night was engraved in his memory, every image, every movement of hers, every gesture that proved her betrayal. Adrenaline was still running through his veins when he heard the sound of the bathroom door opening. Amanda came out with a towel wrapped around her body, her hair still damp. She smiled, as she always did, as if everything was normal, as if Lucas's world wasn't falling apart. But he didn't smile back. He just watched, feeling the hatred and pain mix in a way he had never felt before. She was about to say something, but stopped when she noticed his gaze. Something in Lucas's face made her hesitate. She didn't know that he knew. But I was about to find out. Lucas stood in the living room, feeling the weight of every beat of his own heart, while Amanda crossed the hallway towards him, still drying her hair with a towel. Her gaze met his, and for a brief moment, there was silence. Not a comfortable silence, but one that carried the weight of something about to explode. Amanda hesitated for a second, as if her intuition told her something was wrong. But still, he tried to hide it. The discreet smile, the controlled expression, the carefree posture. But Lucas knew. And she had no idea she was about to face the most devastating moment of her life. He took a deep breath, feeling the bitter taste of revolt in his mouth, his muscles tense as if ready for an inevitable confrontation. Every part of his body told him to scream, to explode, to throw everything he had discovered in her face. But no. He wanted something worse. I wanted Amanda to drown in her own guilt. I wanted to see the exact moment she realized she had been caught. He held out his hand, and in the middle of his palm, her phone. The phone she left on the table, without imagining that it would be her sentence. Amanda frowned for a moment, not understanding, until the screen lit up, revealing the message that Lucas left open. The words shone in the darkness of the room, carrying the weight of betrayal. I still taste you. When will we see each other again? Her body stiffened. The towel he was holding fell to the floor, forgotten, as his eyes ran frantically across the screen. The air became dense, heavy, loaded with something that could no longer be reversed. Lucas waited. He waited for her to say something, anything. But Amanda just opened and closed her mouth, trying to find an explanation that didn't exist. His anger boiled over. Say something. The voice was deep, hoarse, filled with something that not even he could name. Amanda ran her tongue across her lips, a failed attempt to moisten them, and when she finally tried to speak, her voice was low, almost a whisper. Lucas. I can explain. He laughed, but there was no humor in the laugh. Explain. Explain what, Amanda? That while I was at work, killing myself to secure this house, this life, you were in the arms of another man? That every kiss I gave you, every touch, every look, meant nothing to you? His voice rose with each word, until it became a scream muffled by pain. Amanda flinched, her eyes filling with tears. It's not like that. It wasn't like that. I never wanted to hurt you. Lucas took a step forward, feeling his own chest burning with indignation. You never wanted to hurt me. Do you have any idea what you did to me? What you're doing now? She tried to touch him, but he pulled away. The gesture, no matter how small, hurt more than any words. Lucas, I was wrong. I know I was wrong. But I love you. He closed his eyes for a moment, laughing again, an empty laugh. Do you love it? So tell me, Amanda, did you say that to him too? Did you look into his eyes and say the same things you said to me before going to sleep? Amanda swallowed hard, tears streaming down her face. It was a mistake. No. He walked over, holding her phone between his fingers, squeezing hard until his knuckles turned white. A mistake is forgetting to buy milk at the store. Cheating is not a mistake, Amanda. It's a choice. You chose this. You chose every message, every encounter, every touch. This wasn't a mistake. It was you consciously stabbing me in the back. She cried. And he watched. For the first time, he didn't feel like holding her, comforting her, telling her everything would be okay. Because it wouldn't be. Never again. And then, he picked up the suitcase he had already packed. I'm leaving. And you're going to reap the consequences of what you did. Amanda's eyes widened, her lips trembling. No. Lucas, please. Don't do this. We can get through this. We can try. Give me one chance, just one. He was already at the door when he stopped and looked back. If I were you, I would worry less about what comes between the two of us now and more about what comes after that. She frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" Lucas smiled. But it wasn't a smile from someone who would forgive. It was the smile of someone who knew something she didn't. Something that would destroy everything around her in a way that not even her betrayal could. And when Amanda found out, it would be too late. Lucas left the house feeling the weight of each step he took, as if he were stepping on broken glass, as if the air around him had become too heavy to breathe. The sound of the door closing behind him was drowned out by the tumult of his own thoughts, by the whirlwind of emotions that seemed to tear his chest from the inside out. The pain was still raw, throbbing, burning like a hot iron in his soul. He wanted to scream, punch walls, break everything he came across, but it was no use. Nothing would change what had already been done. Nothing would make Amanda go back in time and choose again, and this time, choose him. He drove aimlessly for a while, his eyes fixed on the road but his mind far away. Every red light, every intersection, every car beside him was just an indistinct blur amidst the chaos spreading inside him. When he realized it, he was standing in front of an unfamiliar building, one of those short-stay hotels, with discreet signs and an almost anonymous entrance. I didn't know why I ended up there. Maybe because he couldn't bear the idea of returning home, to that place that was no longer a home, to the rooms that now seemed cold, empty, contaminated by the lies that Amanda built in silence while he, blind, believed he was living in a solid marriage. He picked up his cell phone, looked at the illuminated screen and saw countless missed calls. Amanda. She was desperate. Messages arrived one after another, some begging for forgiveness, others trying to justify the unjustifiable. He took a deep breath, trying to ignore the anger that rose like poison in his throat. He threw the phone on the passenger seat and closed his eyes for a moment, trying to find a semblance of calm in the midst of the hurricane. But there was no calm. There was only the bitter realization that it had all been a lie. Amanda, at this very moment, was probably sitting in the living room, hands shaking, tears streaming down her face. But he didn't feel sorry for her. I felt hate. He felt a deep contempt, a coldness that he never imagined he could feel for the woman who was once his greatest love. He knew that pain wouldn't go away anytime soon. That he would carry the scars of that moment for a long time. But there was something Amanda didn't know. Something that would turn this whole situation into something much bigger than just a destroyed marriage. The next day, he woke up before the sun rose. He didn't sleep properly, he just closed his eyes for a few hours, his mind oscillating between extreme tiredness and the need to act. He took a quick shower, put on the first clothes he found in his suitcase and left the hotel without looking back. His fate was now clear. The time had come for Amanda to face the real consequences of what she did. When he arrived home, he found the door ajar. The atmosphere was different, darker, more charged. Amanda was sitting on the sofa, her eyes red from crying, her face pale, her hands clasped in her lap as if she were awaiting trial. As soon as he saw Lucas enter, he jumped up, his expression somewhere between relief and despair. But he didn't give her time to speak. His cold gaze silenced her before any words were spoken. She hesitated for a second, as if gathering the courage to say something she thought could change everything. But he was tired. Tired of lies, of excuses, of trying to fix what was already broken. And then, he finally said what she hadn't expected to hear. Amanda stood still, eyes wide, shock evident in her expression. It wasn't just regret that now took over his face, but something bigger. Something worse. She opened her mouth to try to respond, but no words came out. He tried to lean on the table next to him, but his hands were shaking so much that he almost dropped everything on the floor. Lucas didn't look away. I wanted to see her every reaction, every detail of the moment in which Amanda would realize that everything she did had a high price. And now, that price was about to be charged. The silence lasted for long seconds until, finally, Amanda managed to let out a single whisper. Lucas stood there, watching her, feeling a dark satisfaction rise within him. She wanted to cry, she wanted to beg, but he no longer saw anything in her other than a woman who destroyed everything with her own hands. And he knew that from that moment on, nothing would ever be the same. Amanda felt her own body failing, as if at any moment she was going to collapse right there, in front of him. The ground beneath his feet felt unstable, his breathing was uneven, and the weight of the truth Lucas had just revealed made every muscle in his body tremble. Her eyes were wide, fixed on him, hoping that maybe there was some chance that those words were a lie, that he was bluffing, that everything was a mistake. But it wasn't. Lucas's gaze was cold, determined, with no room for doubt. The silence between them was suffocating, filled only by the distant sound of the world outside, which continued to spin as hers crumbled inside. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The words seemed stuck in his throat, crushed by growing despair. She tried to get closer, her steps hesitant, her arms raised in an instinctive reflex to seek comfort, but Lucas's expression made her stop instantly. He backed away, as if her presence were a poison he refused to breathe. His eyes were filled with something Amanda had never seen before. It wasn't just anger. It wasn't just disappointment. It was something worse. Something she knew she could never undo. Lucas crossed his arms, took a deep breath, but his chest still rose and fell unevenly. When he finally spoke, his voice was controlled but carried with a harshness that made Amanda shiver. "Did you think it was going to stay like this? That I was just going to scream, walk out of here, hate you and go on with my life while you went on with yours as if nothing had happened?" She blinked rapidly, feeling tears burning in her eyes. "Lucas, please. I didn't want any of this to happen like this. I made a mistake. I know nothing I say will change what I did, but listen to me, please. Give me a chance to explain." He laughed, but it was a bitter laugh, full of irony and contempt. "Explain? What exactly do you think needs explaining? You slept with another man while I was killing myself for this house, for this life we've built. You looked me in the eyes every day knowing you were cheating on me. You would come back to this house, lay in our bed and pretend everything was fine. Do you think there's something here I don't understand?" She shook her head desperately, tears streaming down her face. "It wasn't like that. It wasn't like you think. I felt alone, I felt lost. But I never wanted that to mean I didn't love you. I just let myself get carried away, it was weakness, it was." Lucas slammed his hand on the table next to him, the noise echoing throughout the room. "Weakness? Weakness, Amanda. Do you want to call it weakness? Weakness is giving in to a momentary desire and regretting it the next minute. Weakness is something that happens once and that destroys you from the inside. What you did was not weakness. It was a choice. There were several choices, over and over again. It was you leaving the house, finding him, taking off your clothes, giving yourself in and then coming back to me as if nothing had happened. Weakness is not planned. Weakness is not make it a habit." She sobbed, bringing her hands to her face, her entire body shaking. "I don't know what to say. I don't know how to fix this." Lucas turned away from her, eyes fixed on the floor, jaw clenched. "You can't fix it. Some things are beyond repair. Some things just break and never go back to the way they were before." Amanda gripped the edge of the table, trying to find something to hold on to, as if that would keep everything from collapsing further. She wanted to touch him, she wanted to beg him, she wanted to pull out of her everything that made him believe that, somehow, they still had a chance. But Lucas was no longer there. The man who loved her, who protected her, who would do anything for her, he had left the moment he found out about the betrayal. What was left now was just a hurt, broken man, who just wanted to see her world fall apart like his had already fallen apart. He took a few steps back, grabbed his car keys and walked to the door. Amanda panicked. "Where are you going? Don't leave me here. Lucas, please. Talk to me." He grabbed the handle but didn't look back. I will see your destruction begin. Amanda felt a chill run up her spine. What do you mean by that? He took a deep breath before finally turning to face her one last time. You'll understand soon. Just don't say I didn't warn you. And then, he left, leaving Amanda behind, crumbling under the weight of her own choices. Time seemed to have stopped inside that house, as if the air was suspended, as if everything that was once familiar was now strange, empty, colorless. She fell to the floor, sobs taking over her body, unaware that, at that exact moment, Lucas had already started what would change her life forever. Treason had already been exposed. But now, it was time for the real punishment to begin. Lucas walked without looking back, each step taking him away from the house where his life had fallen apart. The cold wind bit his face, but nothing compared to the ice that now existed inside him. The pain was no longer an uncontrolled fire, but something more dangerous, a dark calm, the absolute certainty that I would never be the same again. Deep down, I knew Amanda was still there, probably lying on the floor, choking on her own sobs, trying to find a way out of something that was beyond repair. But that no longer mattered. The time when he cared was left behind along with everything he thought was true. Now there was only one thing left, the consequence. He drove aimlessly through the city, his thoughts overlapping, his anger transforming into something even greater. Amanda had destroyed everything, but she wouldn't get away with it. She needed to feel the weight of the choices she made, needed to watch as everything she built fell apart in the same way she did with him. It wasn't just about betrayal. It was about unrepentant betrayal, about false looks, empty words, lying smiles. It was about knowing that while he was living through marriage, Amanda hadn't been there for a long time. And then, he knew what he needed to do. He picked up the phone, dialed a number and waited for the voice on the other end to answer. Amanda, still lying on the floor, felt her lungs tight, her chest painful. His entire body was shaking, not from the cold, but from despair. His gaze fixed on the door through which Lucas had left, knowing that, from that moment on, everything would change. But still, his mind refused to accept it. He would come back. Wouldn't you go back? There was still a chance. There could still be forgiveness. It couldn't end like this. I needed to find him, make him understand, make him see that love still existed. Too late. Very, very late. The cell phone vibrated next to it, but it wasn't Lucas. It was a message. When he opened it, he felt his stomach sink as if he were falling into an endless abyss. His heart raced so violently that for a moment he thought he was going to faint. On the screen, a photo. Not just any photo. But the photo of her with her lover. In bed. The same bed where I slept every night with Lucas. His body froze. Another message followed, a simple warning, prepare. The phone slipped from his hands. Mind raced in panic. Who else had received that? He ran to the computer, trembling fingers accessing social media, feeling his breath hitch when he saw there was no turning back. The images were there. On all platforms. Everywhere. And worse, accompanied by a cold, direct text, with no chance of interpretation. The truth, naked and raw, exposed for all to see. His betrayal was no longer a secret. It was a public spectacle. And Lucas had been the author of that fatal blow. The phone rang again, this time a call. He answered, but his voice came out in a choked whisper. Amanda, what's going on? What is this you're sharing? Her best friend's voice sounded both shocked and condemnatory. He says it's not true. He says it's a setup. But Amanda couldn't say anything. Panic took over every cell in his body. The humiliation was immense, suffocating. Her name was everywhere, the comments piled up, judgments, insults, invisible gazes piercing her. Her world wasn't just falling apart. It was being incinerated. And then, the phone rang again. This time, it was work. He answered reflexively, but could barely speak. "Amanda, we need to talk. You understand that, given all of this, your stay at the company becomes unsustainable. Our team's reputation has been compromised. You need to come here. Now." The ground disappeared beneath his feet. His body shook violently. He tried to breathe, tried to find a thread of rationality, but everything around him was spinning. He left the house in desperation, driving as if he were running away from something invisible, but at the same time inevitable. When she arrived at work, the eyes on her were like blades cutting into her skin. It wasn't just the shame. It was contempt. The trial. The people whispering in the corners, the averted gazes, the whispers that seemed to pierce your skull. He entered the boardroom, but the meeting was short. Cold. Decisive. "You understand that we need to maintain the integrity of our company. Your image is dragging the team's name into something we cannot be associated with. We have received complaints from customers, and even our partners are questioning the situation. We are sorry, Amanda. But your dismissal is inevitable." She tried to argue, tried to beg. But he no longer had a voice. "I had no more respect. There was nothing else." He left the company feeling his legs were weak, his body was numb, as if he were floating in a nightmare from which he couldn't wake up. But the worst was yet to come. When he arrived home, he found the door ajar. The heart raced. He entered the place, looking around, feeling a chill down his spine when he realized what was missing. It wasn't just Lucas's belongings that were missing, but the house. Every piece of furniture. Every object. The environment was practically empty. And then, on the table, a single envelope. He opened it with trembling fingers, and inside, a single document. The divorce request. Lucas's name signed at the end. No letter. No explanation. No goodbyes. Just a dry, definitive, crushing end. And in the bottom corner of the page, a short, handwritten note. "You destroyed everything with your choices. Now live with them." Amanda collapsed to the floor. Alone. Lucas, on the other hand, was already far away. He drove slowly, feeling his breathing finally slowing down. For the first time in a long time, he felt free. The pain was still there, but it was no longer paralyzing. He knew that time would erase the remnants of what he once called love. He knew he would rebuild his life. And he knew, above all, that he would never again be the same man he was before. But that was a good thing. Amanda looked around, realizing that now there was only a suffocating emptiness around her. Betrayal brought him nothing but ruin. There was no turning back. Lucas moved on. And he never looked back. Now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story? How do you see the consequences of betrayal for each character? Comment your opinion. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more impactful stories like this. Here, betrayal is never romanticized. Consequences always come, and no one leaves unscathed. Until next time.